Hi, I'm MJ from Lioness Publications, and good afternoon. In this session, it's going to hopefully be a short one. We're going to look at Justice Scalia. Now, Justice Scalia was a justice that looked at the original meaning of the Constitution at the time it was written. So he looked at the text. So he didn't take into considerations anything that the Constitution might be a living document. And because of that, he clashed with any ideas that were progressive, and he rejected the whole living Constitution. So he went just by the text and what the meaning was at the time the Constitution was put together. He also did not look at what that meant at the time it was put together. So he was looking at the text. When he made his opinions, he didn't soften his views. He was very, very sharp. He didn't compromise. He was insensitive, I think that's the right word to use, to the contemporary realities that we face in the world today. Things like gender, race, a sexual identity. That's where he was coming from. So I'd like to take a look at his chart and see if we can identify some of how he was doing his rulings by what he has in his chart. So we only have one chart to look at. It's his natal chart. So let's take a look at that now. So first, one of the things that's missing here is any angle between Jupiter and Saturn. So Saturn, you think of as the rules, the procedures, the strict adherence of the law. And Jupiter, you think of as the intent of the law, the justice part of it. So we'll take a look at what they are making angles to instead. And I want to bring out a few things first. One thing is we actually have a time of birth for him. So I'm using that. I want to point out that Pluto is up in his ninth house. Ninth house would be the house of law. Okay, house of travel and a few other things, but in this case, legal. Now, if you look at where, or the house that Pluto rules, it will be the second house of money. So he makes his money from what? His rulings, in effect, the law. Another thing I want to point out, he's got Leo on the midheaven. That's the 10th house. Leos want to shine. They want to be the center of attention. So where do we have the ruling planet of Leo? It's in the 5th house. So the sun is sitting in the 5th house. So what does that indicate? He looks at this as being a stage. So in effect, this is a show. He's on display. He's an actor in this. So some of this is very similar to how Trump acts, where he's an actor in something. Now, last thing I want to note, and this is sort of important with his opinions, is his ascendant is Libra, which Libra is justice. So Libra likes to debate things back and forth, likes to have someone else to sort of put opinions against. But more importantly, the ruler of Libra is Venus. Venus is sitting in the 4th house. This is 4th house is ancestry. One of the things that it rules. So that means that this is where he gets the original meaning. He's going back. He's going back to, the fathers of the Constitution. So he's going back to the text. So having said that, let's take a look at some of the angles here. First thing we have is Pluto in conjunct Jupiter. Now, Pluto here with Jupiter, and Pluto is in that 9th house. This is an inconjunct is you can't get there from here. So what do you have? On one side, you have power. The other side, you have the ideals of justice. Now, this whole thing indicates influence behind the scenes. So I'm sure he had a whole network of supporters of what he did to put him into this powerful position. Now, Pluto is also inconjunct both Mercury and Venus. Now, this having two inconjuncts going to Pluto is the yod. It's the finger called the finger of God. And Pluto is, in effect, the planet that it's heading to. So it's very powerful. He's here, which means that power is very important in this case. Now, we have Venus in conjunct Pluto. Venus can be a little softening, but Pluto is very harsh, very control. What does this mean? He's not compromising. So in his opinions, he would not compromise. He would decide on a path, and that would be it. Now we have Pluto in conjunct with Mercury. This again, Pluto coming up is very sharp, very contentious, very quarrelsome, confrontational. So in this case, the sharp wit. So some of this was coming through also in his writings, and this is what the Mercury would show. Now, as I noted, Saturn and Jupiter are not making angles to each other. Jupiter instead is making angle to Pluto, power. When we look at Saturn, it's making an angle to Neptune, and the angle it's making is an opposition, and I have that in red. The inconjuncts I have in orange. So in this case, there's an opposition, meaning that internally there's a struggle between the actual law and order, which is Saturn, and in effect the human suffering, the fantasy, the idealism. But in this case, when you look at his rulings, and Neptune here could make someone uncertain in their law and order, but he's not uncertain at all. So this is really definitely leaning towards the Saturn side. He's very rigid in what he believes. He's very uncompromising. Now, Neptune is also inconjunct to Mars. So what does this mean? Mars is action. Can't get there from here. And in many cases, he may have written beautiful opinions, but a lot of them were, as some people would say, maybe too much of stuff, wasn't practical. But what this indicates that he's made very forceful decisions, his opinions. And you wonder if there's some fog of uncertainty there, because, again, you've got the inconjunct of Neptune. Can't get there from here. But it could also mean that he's trying to write something that has a meaning beyond the decision he's writing. He just can't get there. So he can't get the idealism. He can't get the human suffering part of this in here. Now, that may just be my interpretation. Again, he was very gifted when it came to writing his dissents, but he was also very much on the Constitution, originalist, and onto the text. So when we look at his opinions, they were very clear. I mean, he was definitely, the standards were the text, the Constitution. But in some cases, there are opinions he wrote that maybe weren't according to that. So maybe he was sort of like, oh, okay, if it suits my need, then I'll go that way. Now, some of the opinions would oppose judicial discretion in sentencing. So he wanted things that were firm. He wanted, okay, if this is a crime, then it gets this many years. So no judicial, weaving back and forth. He also defended executive authority against judicial overreach. So he was a fan of each branch staying in their own lane. Now, he did support state sovereignty. So there was, there's three branches of the government, but that's the federal government. We also have states that are sovereign. So they also have rights. They operate within the whole framework, but they have distinct rights. Now, he also dissented on equal protection. So when some of these things in his chart identify the Neptune especially, that there was, he might be aligned with, the human issues here. You're not seeing that in his dissensions. So it definitely went to the Saturn edge. Now, in his dissents, he had very, very sharp language. Even when he dissented, his opinions would be used for debates later. So there is a legacy here. There are many people that think his gift in his writing is, incredible. Other people think not so much. Because remember, adherence to text. So he would stay just with that text. Now, as I noted, his opinions were widely used in debates. But his opinions also, some people thought, reinforced the existing power structures. So again, you're going back to when the Constitution was written. What was the world like then? What was the power like then? So that's an important point. So rather than challenging any of the power structures, he would go along with them. He was also criticized for narrowing the scope of justice when we have a changing society. So he didn't want to take into consideration things with, changes in equality, the views of this, because it wasn't something that was around at the time the Constitution was written. And again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm saying I'm looking at his chart and I'm looking at his opinions and how he may have gotten there. Now, he was rigid in his opinions. And one of the reasons that equality was not part of really his opinions was because equality was not something that was in the not fully developed when the Constitution was written. So in short, are there things here that tell you how he's going to vote? Yes, we've got that power, the Pluto. So in effect, we're looking at expansion of power. We're looking at being able to use our wit to be able to provide a lasting legacy. He's going to write on the side of rigidity and structure rather than on the human part of this. And that Venus ascendant means that since that's in the fourth house of home, it means ancestry is an important consideration, which means he's going back to the time that the Constitution was written. Okay, what did it mean at that time? What was the text? So this explains to some degree that he definitely went the route of the Saturn versus the Neptune. And with the Jupiter and Pluto, he went the route of what? The Pluto. So power. Now, I hope you enjoyed this and have a great day. Bye now.